The final days of October 2003 brought heavy rain to the ruins outside Mexico City, and when the storms passed, the ground near the oldest temple in the complex had opened. A narrow sinkhole, barely 3 feet wide, had appeared at the foot of the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. Sergio Gomez Chavez, an archaeologist with Mexico's National Institute, shone a flashlight into it and saw only darkness, so he tied a rope around his waist, and his colleagues lowered him into the earth. He came to rest at the bottom of a perfectly cylindrical shaft, standing in a man-made tunnel that had been deliberately blocked in both directions by immense stones. Someone had sealed this passage shut roughly 1,800 years ago. And the question that would consume the next 20 years was simple. What was worth hiding for so long? This is Teotihuacan, and something at its heart was built to be buried. To understand what Gomez had found in the dark, you first have to stand on the surface and take in the sheer scale of the place above it. Teotihuacan was, at its height around the year 400, the largest city anywhere in the Americas and one of the largest on Earth. As many as 200,000 people lived here, packed into an urban grid that sprawled across some 20 square kilometers of the Mexican highlands. This was not a village that grew by accident. It was planned. A single great causeway, more than 4 kilometers long, runs straight through the heart of it, lined with temples and anchored at each end by a mountain of stone, and the entire city is tilted, deliberately, about 15 degrees east of north, aligned to something in the landscape or the sky that mattered to its builders. They raised pyramids that echo the silhouettes of the mountains behind them. They invented a way of building, a sloping panel of stone that would spread across Mesoamerica for 1,000 years after them. And here's the fact that should stop you cold. We do not know who these people were. We do not know what they called themselves, what language they spoke, or what name they gave to the greatest city of their world. They left monuments that dwarf almost everything around them, and they left no way to read who made them. Every name you have ever heard for this place is borrowed. Teotihuacan, the Avenue of the Dead, the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, all of it was named not by the builders, but by the Aztecs, who arrived here 1,000 years later and found the city already silent, already ancient, already emptied of whoever had raised it. Anchor what that distance actually means. When the Aztecs walked these avenues, themselves the masters of a mighty empire, this city was as old and as strange to them as a medieval castle is to us. They looked at the pyramids and the ruined temples and could not imagine that mere people had built them. So they decided that gods had. They named it Teotihuacan, a word that has come to mean the place where men become gods, or the birthplace of the gods, and they treated the empty metropolis as sacred ground, making pilgrimages to worship among ruins whose true history was already lost. That is the strange foundation on which everything else in this story rests. The grandest ancient city in the Americas belongs to a people without a name, remembered only through the words of a civilization that came long after them and understood them no better than we do. But the Aztecs never saw the deepest part of what these builders left behind, because the true secrets of Teotihuacan were never standing in the plazas above. They were underneath, hidden in the dark. The builders chose to dig first. The first of those secrets came to light in 1971, and it came to light by accident. Workers were installing a sound and light show at the Pyramid of the Sun, the largest structure in the city and one of the largest ever raised in the ancient Americas, when they uncovered a sealed pit at the foot of its staircase. An archaeologist named Ernesto Tabada went down to investigate, and what he found beneath the pyramid rewrote everything scholars thought they understood about why it stood where it did. Decades earlier, the researcher René Milan had suspected there was something hollow under this mountain of stone. Now the suspicion had a shape. A tunnel ran east from the pit, more than 100 meters into the earth, burrowing toward the dead center of the pyramid. And at its end, the passage opened into a chamber carved into the form of a four-leaf clover, 4 lobes fanning out from a single point almost directly below the summit. Then came the detail that turned the whole thing on its head. The pyramid had been aligned to this cave from the very first stone. The axis of the greatest temple in the city was set to point at the hollow beneath it, which means the cave was not a later discovery, not a basement dug after the fact. The cave came first. The pyramid was built on top of it, deliberately, to enshrine it. They raised the 3rd largest pyramid on Earth to mark a hole in the ground. To understand why anyone would do that, you have to understand what a cave meant to the people of ancient Mexico, and here we can only describe what they believed, not confirm it. In the documented worldview of Mesoamerica, caves were places of emergence. They were the womb from which the first humans were said to have crawled into the light, and at the same time, the mouth of the underworld, the dark passage through which the dead departed the living world. A cave was a doorway that faced in 2 directions at once, toward birth and toward death. To build your holiest temple over one was to plant your city on the exact seam where those 2 forces met. But honesty requires a hard stop here, because the story is not as clean as it sounds. When archaeologists finally reached that cloverleaf chamber, it was essentially empty. Whatever it once held had been looted or cleared away in antiquity, long before any modern hand touched it. For years, the cave was assumed to be natural, a lava tube the builders had simply exploited, though closer study has shown it was heavily shaped by human tools. And the interior of the Pyramid of the Sun, even now, has never been fully excavated. For 30 years, this empty cave was the great buried secret of Teotihuacan. Then the reign of 2003 opened a second one, and unlike the first, that one was still sealed and still full. Return now to the tunnel Sergio Gomez had dropped into, and to the temple standing over it, because that temple is no innocent monument. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent is smaller than the Great Pyramids, but it is the most richly carved structure in the city, its facade crowded with stone serpent heads. And when archaeologists dug beneath its steps in the decades before Gomez, they found something that darkens everything else in this story. The researchers Saburo Sugiyama and Ruben Cabrera uncovered mass graves built into the foundations of the pyramid. Scores of people, many of them dressed as warriors with their hands bound behind them, buried alive or killed to consecrate the building when it was raised. More than 100 bodies laid in careful rows beneath the stone. This is not a gentle place. The temple that guards the sealed tunnel was founded on human sacrifice. The tunnel itself was choked with rubble, packed so tightly that no person could pass, so the first explorers sent down were not people at all. A robot named Tlaloc II crawled into the dark ahead of the archaeologists, and a smaller drone rolled deeper still, mapping what human bodies could not yet reach. Above ground, the geophysicist Victor Velasco Herrera and his team at the National University swept the Earth with ground-penetrating radar, reading the shapes hidden below without disturbing a grain of soil. Their scans traced a passage running roughly 100 to 120 meters, 12 to 18 meters deep, and ending in a cluster of 3 chambers directly beneath the temple. Then came the crucial fact, the one the whole title turns on. This tunnel had not simply collapsed and filled over time. The people of Teotihuacan had sealed it on purpose. Around 1800 years ago, they packed the passage from end to end with mud and stone and debris, not to abandon it, but to close it, to protect and hide whatever they had placed at its far end. Someone wanted this tunnel shut, and shut so completely that it stayed sealed for the entire lifetime of the Roman Empire and beyond. And as Gomez and his team spent years painstakingly emptying that fill, bucket by bucket, they began to understand what had been so carefully hidden. The offerings came in their tens of thousands. More than 75,000 objects, each one placed with deliberate intent. Jade carried all the way from what is now Guatemala. Spiral seashells hauled from the distant Caribbean coast, the bones of jaguars, blades of obsidian, carved rubber balls of the kind used in the sacred ball game, wooden masks inlaid with jade and quartz, greenstone crocodile teeth, a box filled with the wings of beetles. This was not refuse swept into a hole. It was an accumulation of treasure from across a continent, arranged as a gift. And then, as the team pressed deeper toward the three chambers, the walls themselves began to glitter. The glitter was not an accident of the stone. It had been engineered. When the team examined the walls and ceiling of the deepest stretch of the tunnel, they found the rock had been dusted with a fine powder of magnetite, of pyrite, of hematite, minerals ground down and pressed into the surface so that the whole passage would catch and scatter the smallest flicker of light. Gomez has described the effect by unscrewing a single bulb and letting the beam graze the wall, and the pyrite comes alive, glinting across the darkness like a scattering of distant stars. Walk this tunnel by torchlight 1,800 years ago, and you would have felt yourself moving not through the ground, but beneath a night sky buried in the earth. Scattered through that artificial heaven were hundreds of small spheres ranging from the size of a marble to the size of an orange. Each had a core of clay wrapped in a skin of jarosite formed from oxidized pyrite, and when they were new, they would have shone like polished gold. No one knows what they were for. The archaeologist George Cowgill, one of the great authorities on this city, said plainly that the spheres are unique, unlike anything found anywhere else, and that he had no idea what they meant. They remain exactly that. A mystery in the shape of 100 golden orbs rolled into the dark and left. And then, at the very end, the three chambers. Inside them, the builders had constructed a landscape in miniature, tiny mountains and valleys modeled some 17 meters below the surface, and into the low places of that model they had poured liquid mercury, shimmering silver pools standing in for lakes and rivers. Nearby stood 4 statues carved from green stone, dressed in garments and beads, their eyes once set with minerals that would have caught the light. 2 of them were still in their original places, leaning slightly back, their faces tilted as if contemplating the precise point where, in the documented belief of these people, the 3 levels of the universe were thought to meet. Put it all together, and the answer to the question comes into focus. What Teotihuacan sealed beneath its temple was not a hoard of gold, not a vault of riches to be guarded. It was a model of the cosmos itself. A sky of false stars overhead, a river of quicksilver below, a landscape of mountains and water, and figures set to watch over the center of creation. The builders had reached down into the earth and constructed a working replica of their entire universe, then closed the door on it and walked away. This was not treasure to be kept. It was a message about everything they believed the world to be. But past the glittering chambers, at the deepest point the tunnel reaches, 3 more rooms remain. And there, at the threshold of the last of them, Gomez stopped. He stopped, in part, because of the mercury. When the discovery of those silver pools was announced in 2015, it landed as more than a curiosity because mercury was extraordinarily rare in ancient Mexico. It does not sit in liquid form in the ground. To gather it, these people had to mine cinnabar, the red ore, and heat it until the metal wept out, a difficult and dangerous process that made every drop precious. And mercury is reflective, a mirror you can pour, which in the worldview of Mesoamerica tied it to the supernatural, to the shimmering threshold of the underworld. To flood a hidden chamber with it was to spend a fortune on something no living eye was ever meant to see. That extravagance is why some archaeologists believe the mercury marks the approach to a tomb. Because Teotihuacan guards one glaring absence. This was one of the mightiest cities in the ancient world, ruled for centuries by powerful kings, and yet in more than 100 years of excavation, no ruler's tomb has ever been found here. No king's portrait, no royal name. Where the Maya left us the carved faces and sealed graves of their lords, Teotihuacan left silence. So when a sealed tunnel filled with treasure and a river of mercury runs beneath the temple, the temptation is enormous to believe that here at last lies a king. But honesty requires both sides of this. Some scholars read those final chambers as the entrance to a ruler's grave, the missing tomb that would rewrite the history of the city. Others urge caution. Even if human remains were found down there, they argue, it might settle nothing. The occupant could be a priest, a sacrifice, one holy figure among many. Or the whole tunnel could be exactly what it appears to be, a model of the underworld, a cosmogram, never built to hold a body at all. The truth is that no one yet knows, and no one can promise what the last chambers hold. And that brings us to the strangest part of the whole story, the part the title has been circling. They have not opened those final rooms. This is not a curse, and it is not a conspiracy. The answer is quiet and practical. Past the glittering chambers, the tunnel drops below the water table. The deepest rooms are waterlogged, flooded, their contents fragile and saturated, and excavation, by its nature, is destruction. Lift something that has sat in that dark water for 18 centuries into the open air, and you may lose it in a single season. The choice was made to slow down, to stabilize, to conserve, rather than to tear ahead. The interior of the Great Pyramid of the Sun has never been fully opened either, for much the same reason. Some doors are being left closed on purpose. And into that deliberate silence, as it always does, rushed the myth. You have probably seen the videos. A tunnel beneath a Mexican pyramid, and inside it, so the story goes, a carved figure with the smooth skull and hollow eyes of an alien, or an intricate stone disc that looks unmistakably like a flying saucer. The clips spread across the internet for years, each retelling adding a little more certainty. Here, honesty requires a hard stop. Those objects are not from this tunnel. The images stitched into those videos do not come from beneath the temple of the feathered serpent at all, and no such artifacts have been pulled from the earth here. That version is a fiction, assembled online and bolted onto a real discovery until it hardened into something it never was. The same caution applies to a quieter claim that the mercury in the sheets of glittering mineral point to some ancient machine, a buried power plant, a source of energy the old world was not supposed to possess. The people who actually dig this site say no such thing. Mercury and mica carried meaning in Mesoamerica, but that meaning was ritual, not electrical. They were mirrors to the underworld, not components of a generator. Strip away the invented aliens and the imaginary machines, and what remains needs no embellishment at all. A vanished people built a working model of the universe in the dark, laid a river of quicksilver beneath a sky of false gold, and sealed it shut. That is the real thing, and it is stranger than any fantasy welded onto it. And then, having built all of this, they lost it. Around the year 550, the ceremonial heart of Teotihuacan was deliberately burned. The great temples along the central avenue were set alight and thrown down in what looks like a single intentional act of destruction. Who did it remains genuinely unresolved. Some researchers see an invading enemy from beyond the valley. Others read the evidence differently and argue the fire came from within, an uprising of the city's own people against the rulers who had commanded them for so long. Still others point to drought and failing harvests, a slow strangling of the food supply that cracked the society before the flames ever came. The cause is disputed. The result is not. Within 2 centuries, the greatest city in the Americas stood empty. For 1,000 years it waited, silent and half-buried, until the Aztecs came upon its ruins and, unable to imagine mere mortals had raised them, decided the gods must have, and made the dead city holy. That is where the strangeness of this whole story comes to rest. The people who built Teotihuacan, who dragged treasure from across a continent into a tunnel and modeled the cosmos underground, vanished so completely that they left no name for themselves. No language we can read, no face we can be certain is theirs. They left only the thing they buried and the mountain they buried it beneath. So consider what these nameless people actually did. They raised a mountain of stone over a cave, sealed a river of mercury and a sky of false gold in the dark, and set 4 green figures to stare forever at the center of the universe. Then they closed the door and let the earth swallow it. And now modern science stands at that threshold holding radar maps, robots, every tool needed to push into the last drowned chamber, and it chooses to wait, betting a future generation can read those rooms without destroying them. There is a strange irony in it. A people who could not write their own names still sent a message across 1,800 years, and we can hold their offerings in our hands without being able to read them. So I will leave the question with you. Should we open the last chamber, or should some secrets stay buried? Until next time, keep exploring.